Hey, welcome back to Solutionary TV. And this is Ascension Series, but it just turned out that I am flying solo this evening because my fabulous co host, Genesee Roy, is traveling with family. We have both recently left one another at the foot of Mount Shasta after an extraordinary experience being able to show up and be present and marinate in the amazing energy of so many of our world's front runners of experience, science, technology, expansive states of consciousness. It was really an amazing conscious love fest. But we are going to do something that, again, we just keep upping the ante and changing it because this is about community and this is about bringing you into community. So I'm going to start with saying thank you for coming back. Thank you for finding value in what we offer on our channel. Thank you for understanding that there is nothing more important than each of us being able to find the passion and the purpose in our lives to be making a difference. And Solutionary TV is all about that. It is about recognizing that we are all part of the solution. And so, on that note, I'm going to put the telephone number out at the beginning of the show because the truth is, as we are sharing, and I say we, I'm speaking spatially. I have my production manager on cue. I am airing from home this evening so that I would be able to give the best time and content given limiting schedules between conferences. But I'm going to put the telephone number out there because we are going to be taking any and all of your calls that are relevant to your sharing your experiences, you talking about your intuitive hits, your prophetic knowing, all things that are relevant to our human evolution, this growth cycle and transition that we're all going through, some of the vortex energy and the regridding that many of us are experiencing. This is exciting time, guys. So we're going to start out with the telephone number. You are welcome to call in. Amnon will be screening the calls and he'll be putting you through. The telephone number for Solutionary TV is 919-518-9773. And for those of you that have been watching us steadfastly via Skype, you can also reach us by going to computers, plural, 2K voice. Computers 2K voice. So with that out there, 919-518-9773. This is the recap of Mount Shasta. For those of you that followed Genesee and I on our journey to Mount Shasta, there have been some videos that have been uploaded that not only had a pre-show that kind of talked about what we were intending to experience, we also had a recording that was done of Genesee's speaking opportunity. I'm told that the video quality wasn't great. She was in the shadow a lot, but gosh, I hope you heard her message and heard about the various stages of multidimensionality that she has personally embodied, experienced, and came through with tremendous wisdom to be able to share with others so that when you have an experience that feels like it's more than you, but is equally familiar, and you know that it is a soulful integrative experience, you have a context. We all need a context. This is why we have a system. This is why we have so many systems in society. This is why we have religions, and this is why we have dogma and scriptures, policies and procedures. I mean, we're all entrained this way. So we need a point of reference, especially for new experience. And we're going to be talking about points of reference. Going to Mount Shasta, there were a few videos, as I've said. The lead up to that experience for me personally, just to catch you up a little bit, started when I was 5 years old. And I'm one that has always leaned towards prophetic dreams. Many of you know what I'm saying. You have had prophetic dreams. You have had lucid states of dream time, which is when we're mostly fourth dimensional, but we're definitely not 3D, are we? We're not stuck in these bodies necessarily, and we're not just experiencing mind soup. Sometimes, sure, it's a regurgitation of many unresolved issues in our day. But for many of us, we actually go into other states of consciousness for which we have access because we are fractalized divinity, experiencing many states of consciousness and many states of multiverse and embodiment. So for me as a 5-year-old probably well into my early teens, there was a cyclical, consistent dream. And it's one of many, but this one in particular was finding myself at dusk, looking at railroad tracks that were right in front of me and open wooden railroad cars that looked like they might be able to seat 3 to 4 across, and looking at a valley on both sides of the railroad tracks. And at dusk, in kind of the dwindling light, there was a bit of a smoky, sort of a dark hue to the energy, to the color of the environment. And I had family around me, and I recognized them. And I was very, very anxious. I could feel this building excitement. And it wasn't a nervous anxiety. It wasn't negative. It was just this tremendous upwelling of enthusiasm that I needed to get on this open cart and get on these tracks and get moving, because up ahead of me, on either side of this sloping railroad track and pine trees along the sides and meadow going off in both directions, directly in front of the tracks was this beautiful snow-capped mountain. And there was no question which mountain it was, even though I had no personal point of reference. I grew up in Los Angeles in Southern California, but I had never been to this mountain. And my parents had never spoken of it, and I'd never seen anything that gave me reference to it, but I knew it was Mount Shasta. And I needed my family, my physical Earth 3D family, to get on the train. Get on the train, because it's time to go. Because I knew very powerfully that my people, my soul family, were in the mountain, not on the mountain, in the mountain. And they were waiting for me. And I knew that as the train got closer, it was going to take us into some sort of secret entrance into the mountain. So for those of you that are listening, this may stir something in you. This may make sense to you. It may bring back some resonant memories, some whisperings of prophetic dreams that you've had that were part of your wake-up call. We all have, those of us that are light workers, light warriors, way showers. We're meant to be truth tellers. We're meant to stand out, be a little strange in this earth life, not completely buy into society's structures. We had to be rebels. We had to shake it up a little bit. Otherwise, we were going to forget. And we didn't come here to forget. So one of my ways was prophetic dreams, and this was one of those prophetic dreams. And it happened regularly. And for one reason or another, once we'd get going on the train, and I remember cool breeze in my face, and I remember the building enthusiasm and everyone on the train kind of talking to each other, we never got to the entrance. We never got to the mouth of the mountain. I would always wake up or the dream would shift. So as I was invited for the first time to go to this conference back in January of the beginning of this year and be involved in supporting the speakers and the movement and the message of each of the speakers and be an additional voice to promote those speakers and their message, I was able to get very, very intimately connected with many of those that you have already seen, and just kind of touch on it. Genesee Roy, who is now my co-host, was one of those speakers, and I was serendipitously introduced and encouraged to have her on the show. Dr. Raymond Keller, who's been on the show 3 times, was one of those voices that was able to be promoted. Frank Chili, Sherry Lynn, Rob Potter, Dr. Scott Werner. And there were others at the conference that I did not interview, but that I had the opportunity to meet while I was there. So let me set the context. Showing up in Mount Shasta is flying from North Carolina all the way over to Sacramento, full day affair, driving from Sacramento through the fires that were raging in Redding and beginning to all of a sudden spark in various places completely unrelated. And that's a topic that we could talk about for hours. I'm just going to say there was no question that there was interference, that there was malevolent interference and arson taking place, and the potential and the likelihood of targeted direct energy weapons as I felt into it. And the feeling that I had is this isn't going to change why I'm here, where I am going. There's going to be a very, very clear trajectory that I'm meant to be at this conference, and I'm just going to drive right through it. But if I had had any less conviction, it probably wouldn't have been a real good place to spend the weekend because the smoke was so bad. And driving up through there, I recognized this is familiar. I'm coming into the mountains. I've passed Redding. Those of you that know the area, I'm coming down over into various mountain ranges and seeing some of the lakes around there and some of the vacationers, and the smoke is very thick and it's coming into the mountain range as well. But there was this deep, deep sense of the mountain waiting for me, and this familiarity and this excitement and this anticipation of what could take place now. Because I had been told, if you come to the mountain, there may be a choice for you to go into the mountain. And those, again, of you that are familiar with the Cascades, Mount Adams, Mount Shasta, some of the other mountains that are known to have inner earth species, beings that have been here for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, as society has risen and fallen, because our earth history is far more mysterious and more magnificent and now far more historically provable than what we were taught, in school. We always have to re-educate ourselves and question authority, right? So there was this very strong pull that there was intelligence, that there was an opportunity to consider what it would be like to go into that mountain. And I had felt very much invited. And there had also been in this ascension community, in this disclosure community, and I find myself in both camps, more with the propulsion in the ascension community. Why? Because disclosure is important, education is important. The truth of our nature as human beings and as multidimensional beings is pivotal to our growth and to our shaking off the shackles of forgetfulness and re-embracing the truth of who we are. Yes, absolutely. But there can be a very cyclically painful, not so cathartic, but cyclically painful downward spiral when we focus so much on the righteous indignation of disclosure. So there's a very, very delicate dance between knowing what you need to know so that you can free yourself of those shackles and grow at an exponential level and be able to inform others and hold space for others and create that additional reinforcement of a new resonant frequency so others can amp up their frequency too. The universe is all frequency and wave and how we resonate with one another. And when we do that, we are able to make that butterfly effect, that the world a better place. It's easier for everyone because the vibration just stepped up a notch. So others can kind of catch on to the back of our tail feathers, if you will, and be able to step into it with a little bit more ease. So everyone that goes before us and everyone that precedes us, we're all assisting each other. So coming in as one that was focused on ascension and disclosure to get to the point of understanding our ascension, I understood that this conference was going to be in that energy. I understood that the city of Telos that many speak about, that is under Mount Shasta, is a living vibration. It is a multi-dimensional sphere space that might be held into a temporal, exclusive, protected arena that can be accessed if you can resonate with it. So the question became, am I meant to resonate with it? Am I meant to, for all sakes and purposes, forfeit the life that I have outside of the mountain, which includes everything from this identity and the family? And would I make that choice? My commitments, my children, my career, and my life, and rededicate it in a completely new and multidimensional way, because I knew I came here for this event. And there was a lot to think about. That's a lot to feel into. If you've had this experience, if you've been invited to consider stepping out of your 3D, out of this version, this exclusive, this is all that I am, and you know what I'm talking about, and you feel that you've been welcome to consider that choice, 919-518-9773. And in Skype, computers 2K voice. This is building up to this. Every choice we make is creating, and I know this, I feel it, I sense it, and I have experienced those multiverse choices. I stand as an experiencer. Am I an academic? Am I a researcher? Do I apply the intellectual aspects of adherence to some of these scientific principles as they continue to evolve, especially in the realms of quantum fields and quantum science and even some of the astrophysics? Yes, absolutely. I'm always seeking to find the bridges that connect the philosophy and the science, but I'm an experiencer, so I am the bridge. You may be the bridge. If you have a story, trust me, our other viewers, our other audience members want to know about it. 919-518-9773. So I got there and I had an evening to feel before the conference was going to start, before I was going to meet with some of these amazing people. And I drove up into the mountains and made my presence known. And I called out to the elemental kingdom, to the etheric kingdom, to the spiritual energy that is the mountain, that was the sentient life of the flora and the fauna. And I said, I'm here. I'm here. And dusk was falling. I didn't have much time. I'd flown all day from the East Coast to the West Coast and then driven from the West Coast at an airport all the way up to the mountains. And if it hadn't been summer, it would have been pitch black by the time I got there, but there was time. And I could feel the whispering. I could feel the wind. And for any of you that have had trigger memories as a child, you will know what I mean when something feels deeply familiar. And there's no personal experience to play the part of the witness for it. It is just unmistakably familiar. And my eyes welled up with tears. When I was a little girl, I remember being introduced, and this is for you old schoolers. I'm in my 40s, so this was something that I remember, but there was a show that triggered me, and it was called Escape to Witch Mountain. I don't know if any of you know what I'm talking about, but there was Tia and Tony, and they were little extraterrestrial children that were beautiful little humans, and they had crash landed on our Earth, and they had been adopted or fostered by human beings, and they had powers and abilities, and of course the government was always trying to get at them. Isn't that always the case in all of these, Hollywood storylines, is that you have any abilities, whatever, the government's trying to get a hold of you, they're trying to put you in a lab, they're trying to put electrodes on your brain, test your abilities, use you as a lab rat, slice and dice you. But this is an ongoing theme. That memory would always trigger me, and the Mount Shasta dreams as a child. And it was like this constant wake-up call. It's a trigger memory. Many of you have trigger memories. You know what I'm talking about. So I sat up there and I watched this otherwise homeless man with a little dog walking back and forth at one of the lower parking lot areas where I'd left my car. And he was muttering to himself. And I'm a woman. I live in the world. It is starting to get dark. There is the potential of bears and cougars and, other potential predators. I grew up in Southern California. We had rattlesnakes in the mountains. I mean, at the very least, we had cougars and rattlesnakes, maybe even coyotes. And I'm thinking, how intelligent is this choice? How intelligent is this choice to stay? But I knew that I had to be alone if I was going to have this experience. So I stayed and I waited, and I was distracted by this otherwise not entirely solid man in terms of his mental capacity. And I realized this isn't going to be my night, because I need to not have any fear. We are not meant to hold fear to be able to resonate at the level of consciousness that allows us to be able to really powerfully raise up to another experience of our potential. And I knew that was going to be true. I knew that I needed to be in the most zen place possible. And I had all these people to meet at the conference. There was plenty of time. So I'm back to my room, and I did what I do. I go into my deep meditations. I love my sacred acoustics. Those of you that have followed Solutionary TV know that we have worked with consciousness states. And if you need help with monkey mind, if you are struggling to be able to get into your meditation, there's no need. There's no need. There are many, many tools. And my personal recommendation, after having Dr. Eben Alexander, I think he's now 3-time New York Times bestseller, Proof of Heaven, Map of Heaven, and the one that he just co-authored with Karen Newell, both of Sacred Acoustics. They did Living in a Mindful Universe. I've had both of them on the show, and both of them have told their story. And both of them, came together at a pivotal time where consciousness needed to wake up And Dr. Eben Alexander had to be the perfect person, a very academic, very deductive scientific mind, neurosurgeon, neuroprofessor, Harvard teaching, very, very top-notch brain. Struck with E. coli meningitis, taken completely out of his conscious vehicle for 7 days, losing half his body weight, nearly dying, and traveling the multiverses, being visited by amazing, loving, powerfully loving beings that answered all of his questions. And coming out of that state that was 100% improbable, he had a 100% chance of never recovering and a 99% chance of dying. He came out of that fully conscious right before they're ready to take off life support, right? That's the way it is. We hear these stories. They're always miraculous. Half his body weight, having shriveled down to nothing, having been wrought with infection all throughout his spine and his brainstem, and just miraculously healing, coming back into his body. And he had quite a story to tell. And that is, consciousness does not exist in the brain. The brain is a tool for consciousness. The brain is a filter. It's a satellite. The brain is magnificent matter for which resonant frequency can run through to be interpreted by the occupant soul. So if you're having a problem with meditation, get your earbuds on. Go to Sacred Acoustics. They've made an amazing package just for this audience and my students, and it's called the Ascension Bundle. The Ascension Bundle, and it's dynamite. And they have a brand new one that just came out too that I highly recommend, that is an addition to my favorite jam, and it's called Body and Soul. I've got it around here somewhere, but it's brand new. When you go and take a look at it, it is going to, they always have samples that you can listen to. So I'm thinking this is the energy vibration I want to be in. I'm in Mount Shasta. I want to be clear. And I put on my earbuds and I went to sleep just flying through the cosmos in this amazing vortex energy. Do you know how underdeveloped Mount Shasta is for a vortex area? Having been to Sedona and having been to Egypt and Cairo and been to Machu Picchu and other high energy areas, Mount Shasta looks like it didn't occur to anybody to develop this town. It's just as sleepy and fascinatingly migrant with the people that come in and out of there. You would have thought it had been a flashback to the mid 70s. So it was spectacularly preserved and underwhelming in its built out and holding its authenticity as a high vortex energy space. So let me talk to you about what kinds of magic happen at a conference. How many of you have been called to go and meet others, a community, a tribe, and it seemed improbable? It was too far. It was a conference you couldn't afford. It was a trip that you didn't have the vacation time to take. It was a sense of unfamiliarity, even though you really wanted to go. It was the sense of, I don't have anybody to go with me. And who will share the hotel room? Folks, we've all been there. This is the time for community. This is the time for community. The divine has not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. Seeking first, seeking first, seeking first. We are meant to be seeking divinity within and marrying that, merging that, sharing that with divinity outside of ourselves. And the only way to do that is to meet your own soul in the eyes of another seeker. Nothing is more magical than making raw, vulnerable, really, truly connected eye contact. I'm trying to make it with you right now. I'm telling you, looking into the eyes of those members of my soul community at the From Venus with Love conference, in an ascension zone, in a vortex energy, in 2018, with all the planets coming into this unique alignment that Michael Bradbury keeps giving us forewarning of, going in within that very night of the conference, first night of the conference, into a lunar eclipse blood moon, intense energy, all while being in the great year, all while experiencing this interplanetary climate change that we've been told about for so long as part of the nearly 26,000 year cycle that is leading to this natural state of human evolution. Big stuff, right? I'm going to throw out the number one more time. I'm telling you, call. You've got something important to say. You've got something important to share. 919-518-9773, computers 2K voice for you Skypers. And I realized it doesn't matter what happens from this moment on because I'm in this moment. I'm just in this moment. I did what I needed to do. I had asked guidance, where can I connect with more of my tribe? And guidance said, you have to go where you're called. This kind of sounds like prophecy, doesn't it? I mean, how many of you were raised with scripture? How many of you were raised with some form of religious dogma that came in the form of visions and dreams and firsthand experiences of prophets, seers, and revelators? I was. I was raised in a patriarchal religion with all types of scripture to study. And then when I was ravenous and couldn't get enough, I went and studied world religion and every religion I could get my hands on, and their scriptures and their dogma and their additional supplemental witnesses by their modern day prophets, and then the mystery schools, and it just deepens and deepens. And when you're called to go somewhere, whether you're Jonah trying to avoid going into the city of Nineveh, I don't need to get swallowed by a whale to get the fact that there's places where I need to go if I want to find my tribe and my community. Or I have to create a show like this to create my tribe and community and have faith that those that will be served are going to be served. And I hope you're being served because this is for you. 919-518-9773. So what happened? We get into the conference, and I've been to a lot of conferences, guys, a lot of conferences, and they're high energy because you've got so many people that are so excited to hear the material. They are so excited to see their consciousness superstars. I have been to big conferences filled with hundreds to thousands of people, and I've traveled to London, and I've traveled to Los Angeles and New York and all around the country to go to some of these conferences. And this was a really remote place to go. This was not an easy route to get to be quite honest. Getting all the way up into Mount Shasta, it was actually in a maintained dance hall in McLeod, just down the hill from it, where recently, I'm told, Corey Good and the entire Eclipse of Disclosure movement had been recently and filmed when we had that eclipse a year ago in August. So we've got all of this great energy, all these people that are choosing these amazing locations. And essentially, we were able to see, sorry, I'm just realizing that we're dealing with a little bit of technology and a little bit of blur. It just looks like we're needing to close out a couple of other things, and I'm going to do that right now. Okay, hopefully that took care of it. I don't like the technology when it fights us, folks. Let's tell the technology no with me. You tell the technology no. Okay, let's see if that made it better. All right, so getting back to this story, I am able to embrace Genesee Roy and feel into the message that she has, because she's here to talk to these conference folks about their multidimensionality. She is here to step into this glorious place of recognizing that many have been experiencing it in dream states and meditation states and very, very lucid states of consciousness, and they need to know how to navigate it. So Genesee is there with this amazing message. I hope some of you were able to see it when we posted it on our YouTube channel and on BitChute. Take a look at both of those, please. And then we had Dr. Scott Werner, and I was able to ascend Mount Shasta with him and a small group of individuals, and I can't wait to tell you a little bit more about that as we go deeper into it, because that was a charter for me. That was a charter moment. I had told him I was called to the mountain, and he had told me he had been called to the mountain and that he had elected not to go in. For those of you that know his story, that you listened when he came onto the show, or you have followed him on Facebook or on YouTube, you will know that he had already spoken in Mount Shasta a few years back. And he was told, and had a visitor. He speaks to Saint Germain and Ascended Masters, and he was told that if he went in those thinning veil wee hours of the morning that are kind of between 2 and 5 a.m., most of you that know that that's when the veil is super thin, that if he drove up there in his truck, that he would be shown the entrance. And he had been shown what the entrance looked like before he'd gone. And as he was climbing into his car at 3 a.m. on that particular trip, not this most recent one that was a few years back, He got in his car, and out of the home that he was staying at, where many speakers were staying, another woman that he hadn't met, who had seen him leave the building, came running out to the car, and he opened it for her, and she said, may I travel up the mountain with you? And he said, sure, sure. I mean, he didn't know who she was, but he's a pretty easygoing fellow. And she climbed in and she said, so you're going to the mountain? And he said, yes. And she said, have you been called to the mountain? And he said, yes, yes, I have. And she said, I was called to the mountain. And he piqued his interest. He's listening. Sure. And she said, and I went in. And he listens. And she said, and I never went out. I never left. And he gets a peculiar vibe running through him, gets some chills, turns and looks over at her, and she's gone. She's left the moving vehicle. She's disappeared. It didn't take him very long for him to realize that that was a warning. That was a loving consideration of, do you know if you go in, you may not come back? Now, most people that work with near-death experiencers know that they're very often told they need to go back or given the opportunity and asked, would you like to go back? Here's the reasons to go back. Here's what your family needs. Here's a mission that you could still be involved in. Here's part of your purpose that may not be complete. And many say nothing is harder than the idea of having to go back into their body that has been traumatized, injured, broken, whatever. But he decided right then and there, I'm not going to the mountain because I don't want to find myself in that position. Well, it's ironic, isn't it? It's really ironic because Dr. Scott Werner, who will tell you more about his story and was so dynamic to listen to, the man has got more energy than an Energizer bunny. He just goes and goes and goes. You would never believe that he is a man in his later 50s, maybe early 60s. I haven't asked him. But he is an older gentleman, and he has been living a very full life as a general surgeon, as a gynecological surgeon, as a practicing doctor in St. George, Utah, and as a wellness professional. And he has then experienced, shortly thereafter, after his experience of going up to Mount Shasta and choosing not to go in, he experienced what it was like to, what he would state to you very plainly, was being targeted, like many other holistic doctors, alternative doctors, and whistleblowers. Those of you that have been following Dr. Mercola and Erin Elizabeth of HealthNet News and many others that have been featuring it, we have lost a lot of good, solid health and wellness practitioners, doctors, those that have spoken out against the establishment, those that have provided other means to cure cancer and inflammation and debilitating diseases, and are speaking out against the overuse of pharma and the vaccine agenda. So many have lost their lives that have been taken out in clear homicides, others very suspicious suicides, others all of a sudden stricken with diseases that made no sense and certainly did not adhere to the way that these individuals live their lives. Well, Dr. Scott Werner, and he prefers that I not call him doctor anymore, and you'll understand why in just a moment. Scott Werner was also one of those that was targeted. And those of you that have followed Dr. Stephen Greer, you'll know that he and his entire team were targeted right at the point where they were about to provide some disclosure. And he's got very powerful testimony about what happened to him and why he believes that he was able to overcome the targeting. And given all the technology that's out there now with energy and resonance and frequency and scalar waves and a lot that you can research that we aren't going to get into here, it really isn't that difficult to be targeted by those with the scientific means to take you out. So what had once been a challenge for Scott Werner, as he shared much more in depth at the conference and somewhat on the show, if you look in the archives, was that he was targeted and his entire body was overcome, and he found himself in the emergency room with complete major organ failure. And I mean, consider what organ failure would look like on a systemic level. His heart was not damaged. His brain was not damaged. Those were the only exceptions, and he was very clear about that. But if your liver and your kidneys and your endocrine and your adrenals and everything else is being shut down, your lungs, he flatlined. And while the EMTs are working on him, he rose above his body And he tells this miraculous story at this conference of being surrounded by his ascended masters, his angels, Saint Germain. And he's saying this while he's running back and forth on the stage, breaking his sweat, and so much energy and so much passion and juice for life. And it just doesn't fit. The story is not fitting the man you see in front of you. And he says, I took a look at them and they looked at me and they indicated it was time to go. And I looked down at my body and I recognized that I didn't feel entirely complete. And he said he asked Saint Germain, and he asked the ascended masters that were around him, is this my time to go? Could I go back into my body? And they said, and he said it kind of playfully and sarcastically, I'm saying, we wouldn't recommend it. You've had complete organ failure. It's going to take a lot to heal. It's going to hurt. It is going to be a lot of work. Are you sure you want to do that? And he said, I need to see the timeline that we're on. I need to see the potential future that my wife and my 2 young daughters are going to inherit, because he did have a younger wife and he did have 2 young children. And he was shown. And he couldn't live with what he saw because of the depression, because of the loss, because of the struggles that they were going to experience. And he's breaking into tears in front of everyone in this conference. He's sharing so deeply, so passionately. The energy in the room is so thick. You're feeling it with him. You're journeying with him. And the energy is so intense, and you just recognize this is what we are. We're eternal beings. We are these powerful God beings in individuated soul form in these bodies. And coming in and out of the veil is sometimes no different than really just taking off a heavy cloak and changing our clothes. We are so eternal and limitless. And he had a choice. How much co-creative power do we really have, guys? And you're feeling this experience and you're hearing him. And his co-creative choice was to do the hard job of going back into his body, of being able to be the self-healer, walking the hard and rocky path of self-ownership of his own principles that he'd been teaching as a holistic doctor, one that had taken the allopathic background and taken a different direction. And the only thing that he's still working with is getting his pancreas and his blood sugar back. He's still experiencing aspects of type 2 diabetes. Now, he doesn't look like anyone that would have a health problem. He's lean, he's fit, he's got tons of energy, but full system failure or major organ failure is no small business. So this has been part of the drudgery of the path and the work that he placed in front of himself as this emissary for ascended masters and Saint Germain. And I want to touch on what he's put out there. He's put out there because he's talking to Saint Germain all the time, and it is available if you look at Scott Werner and 24-strand DNA. We have not just double helix, we have 12 helixes for 24-strand DNA. And there are those that will say on an etheric level, on an astral level, on a spiritual level, that it continues to ascend and ascend into higher combinations of DNA strands that are coming back together for us as we move from carbon-based bodies and beings to a more of a crystalline-based human being. And that with each one of these escalations, our energy becomes finer. And our density, all this empty space in us, starts to change. This is really exciting. So he has provided for all of us this calling in of the 24-strand DNA, because what have we been told? It doesn't matter what walk of faith you have or philosophy. If you have listened to any of those that have come before us, thank goodness so many came before us as way showers, you have to ask. You aren't going to get truth unless you ask. You aren't going to get internal truth and your own personal witness if you don't go inside. As long as your answers exist out there, as long as they come in from society and herd mentality and our education systems and your boss and your parents and your religion, you don't have to throw away the whole baby on the bathwater. You just have to question all of it, and you have to bring it right in here, and you have to say, from a place with which I am unlimited celestial divinity, and where all truth is here. Now I'm going to weigh this in. This is how I was educated. These are my parents' beliefs. This is the philosophies of my traditions and my culture. This is my religious beliefs, if I happen to have any. This is how the world has presented itself to me. How much of it is true? This is what mainstream news and media wants to tell me. This is what my particular friends and close acquaintances happen to believe on their philosophy about the world. And you have to go here and you have to get those answers. So if we're graduating and our junk DNA, quote unquote, junk DNA is actually realigning and we are becoming these multidimensional beings, it makes sense. Ask, call it in. He also has decrees of protection because he has needed those decrees of protection. He has been targeted by the cabal, the Illuminati, the elite syndicate. There's so many different names. And I don't want to give him too much power. It's not a Voldemort thing. It's just, come on, do we really want to co-create any more in their field? Nah, let's not give him any of that energy. But do they exist? Yeah, absolutely. Because we are in a 3D/4D blueprint. Anything is possible here. It's not the kindest place to be. You can find the kindest people and have the most transcendent experiences, and you can swing to the other end of the pendulum, and you can have this earth life be a true embodied hell. You can see it. We're looking all around us, can't we? It's choice. It's an active choice. And that's going to lead into one of the other speakers that I didn't have a chance to interview on the show that just brought the room into this amazing shifted platform of co-creation. I'm going to get there in a minute. But what did we learn? We learned, number one, there's choice. You may receive an invitation to transcend, to resurrect, to embrace your light body, your rainbow body, your ascended self before the vast majority of society. I have received that invitation. Have you received that invitation? If you have, 919-518-9773, computers 2K voice. Let's hear about it. Scott Werner did twice. He could have moved into a multidimensional version of himself and gone into the secret city of Telos, or he could have allowed himself to remain safely, painlessly outside of his body and move on being a eventually resurrected being and a way shower from the other side of the veil. And he kept choosing the tough stuff. Stay in the body, get back into the body, be an active way shower, and change your attitude about being a 3D human. You're not stuck as a 3D human unless you think you are. You got to constantly be scaling your multidimensionality, but he didn't feign getting back into that body. And I'm going to touch on what it was like to hike Mount Shasta with him and what happened because of those sacrifices coming to the body. But the next big lesson that came through in the conference, I had Frank Chili come up to me and he introduced me to this woman who was absolutely familiar to me. And I immediately could sense why. It was because there was a spirit of a powerful, powerful woman that had done my Akashic Records reading when I was back in my early 30s. And for those of you that don't know Akashic Records, everything that has ever been that this soul iteration of us experiences is held in these volumes and held in these halls of historical recording of all that we have been. And she read mine and explained to me that this was my last lifetime and that I had X amount of karma/forgiveness work to do in this lifetime, and why it was important for me not to ever waste any time getting too caught up in playing in 3D density, which didn't come very naturally to me anyway. And her name was Roberta Herzog, and she has since transitioned. But the woman that walked up to me with Frank Chili, who has also been on the show and is just an amazing, powerful, so connected, so many way showers that have come before us that have been documented and have been, in many cases, published and photographs taken. But he came into my life and brought this woman, and he walks up to me with her, and I could feel Roberta Herzog's energy all around this woman. I could see her in her eyes. This is where the souls meet. This is where the souls connect, and you recognize people you shouldn't recognize. Why did I recognize her? Because she was a familiar soul, because we were meant to meet at this conference, because I listened to guidance and I had the courage to do what didn't make sense to a lot of people. Why do you want to travel that far? Why do you want to spend that much money? Why do you want to be someplace so, remote? And for what? What's the purpose? Because I was supposed to be there. And it turns out that she had carried on in the work and the tradition of Roberta Herzog and had been one of her best friends. And Roberta's energy was all over those two. And she just came in and wrapped her loving energy around all three of us. And I'm in tears meeting a stranger because she's not a stranger. And I just wanted to hold her and say, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your soul presence and Roberta's here to this place and meeting me and looking me in the eyes and reminding me of this eternal connection that we have right now. And it turns out she happens to live within driving distance of me here in North Carolina. Serendipity? Maybe, maybe not. You just have to ask yourself, how does divine timing align for you? If you are following that inner directive, that inner purpose, that passion that you know is yours. When you do that, miracles happen. Being with her and Frank, it was a miracle. It was amazing. It was an amazing love fest. And there is going to be more connection that I'm going to be doing with both of them that we have already discussed going forward. So there was that connection. And I am arms wrapped around listening to Raymond Keller. And we're talking about the fact that this gentleman who's been on my show 3 times, who has a ticket to ride, and I mean, it's a real ticket. I have the picture. I will post it for those of you that would like to see it on the website and on the YouTube channel or the Facebook page, which is where we've put some pictures in the past, right? Frank Chili provided us the pictures of those extraterrestrial beings that would come and be a witness to Roberta and to another woman whose name at this moment it's not I'm not able to pronounce, but we provided those on the Facebook page. And then now we've got Raymond Keller, who has had pictures with the Queen of Venus. He's been on the front of major newspapers back in the 50s and 60s, before it was, a discountable thing to say that you believed in extraterrestrials or that you believed in interdimensional beings. This is back when, before Roswell got completely quashed and the rest of society got brainwashed into thinking that that was hokey and nonsense. And now we're making a comeback, right? But he was there and he had a ticket that had been provided to him when he was speaking at a conference by a woman that was hairless and a little odd looking and possibly not entirely from around the block, not necessarily from here. Think a little bit, Men in Black and not nearby. And she came up to him and she told him, this is a ticket. And when you're ready, you are going to be able to be returned to a peaceful earth, an earth that has already, received its level of healing and ascended energy. And he was saving it for this conference, which I just thought was phenomenal. And we're talking about this, and a reporter walks up from the Mount Shasta Herald, and she wants to interview him. And he looks at me and he goes, "You need to come. You need to come because we're talking about this opportunity, and we're talking about ascended beings, and we're talking about Lady Ankara, who is a Venusian ascended once 3D human woman by the name of Annalise Scarin, or Scarin, depending on how you pronounce it, who I was led to study for years in my 30s and read her books, Ye Are Gods, and how she was able to apply the mystery schools of Christianity and the religion of my youth, which was Mormon, and take it to the next level of, hey, death is a choice, but it's not the only choice. There is another doorway to divinity, and it is to be therefore perfect, even as divinity, even as your Father, Mother, God is perfect. And it is a frequency shift. It is an alignment shift. And she talks about the steps on how to do it. And I was just taken by her truth, by her principles, by her scriptural adherence to these profound inner refiner's fire that she was capable of becoming and doing, and then the claim that she had been and it become an ascended they say translated being or resurrected being, and this was this commonality because Raymond Keller and I had both studied her, and then he said that he studied her work and then was brought to the foot of Mount Shasta years before, and that he'd actually seen her as Lady Ankara and that she's now a Venusian. Okay. Sure, Raymond, that sounds amazing. Well, it turns out that Annalise Scarin and I both have a joint relative. So we're laughing at how we get into these overlays of connection with individuals that we're called to be present with, that we're called to be corroborated with and validated, right? What is more exciting than looking into the eyes of someone that you physically never met, but whose soul you've never left? And you recognize each other in this form, in this density. The celebration of the soul is not easily described. And that was what I was experiencing with Genesee Roy, with Dr. Scott Werner, with Frank Chili, and this lovely woman he was introducing me to, and the divine spirit she brought in, that was Roberta Herzog. And now I'm having this with Raymond Keller, and it's so powerful. So we go upstairs and we start doing this interview, and he and I are tag teaming with this, with this reporter who's just such an open-minded soul. And that ended up being put in the Mount Shasta Herald. But we were talking about how much further science has gotten, and why it was so important for people to wake up and do a little investigative study. Folks, we have had physics models and Tesla science, and even Albert Einstein, and many of the others that have come during his genre, and before and after. They've understood that this is a universe of wave and frequency. We're only now finally getting really academic with the work being done in Caltech and some of these Russian labs and universities, understanding about the impermeability of matter, the migratory energy of matter, and really the negligible amount of the universe that happens to be matter, less than 5%. The rest of it is all dark energy, some dark matter. But gosh, we're so much more than we thought. So we're having this discussion with her, and she's amazed, and she's telling us, there's been a lot of sightings of extraterrestrial craft. Just for the last week, it seems to have come with the fires, and maybe it's come with this conference, but you guys really called stuff in. So we have this exquisite experience with her. A group of people come up to the room that we're in that's above the conference, and another woman walks in and she goes, "Did you see Annalise Scarron?" And she goes, "I studied her." Listen, folks, you could be anywhere in the world and be within 10,000 people, 100,000 people, and no one's going to have heard of this woman. Divine timing, flawless synchronicities. So let's talk a little bit about these flawless synchronicities as we get ready to talk about some of the other speakers. I'm going to welcome you again. If nobody calls in, I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to keep sharing this conference with you, and we're going to keep debriefing what is possible when you hear the call of your community, when you answer the call of your community. 919-518-9773, Skype, computers, 2K voice. And I'm going to trust that Amnon, who is my wonderful production and studio owner and manager, will interrupt if we do get a call or we get someone in the chat room that is looking to talk to us. I am not checking my phone, but perhaps I should have. Amnon, if I need to be checking my phone, I'm going to let you blink it. Do we have anybody, Amnon?
Nope.
Okay. You just popped in. Awesome. Okay. So I'm encouraging all of you that are listening. We usually have anywhere from 5 to 10,000 people live on Monday evenings. I don't know how many are there now, but I'm going to tell you right now, I want to hear what you have to share. This is not just my story. I'm just a soundbite. I'm a soundbite during this transitional time. I'm a soundbite on the ascension ladder. I've chosen to stay. I'm still here. It is a choice. You're making the choice. I'm making the choice. Some of us consciously, actively are making the choice, and a lot of us are unconsciously choosing to be here by not knowing we actually have the choice, not recognizing that there is a natural order to our evolution, and that the earth is ascending and that we are ascending. And it's going to feel a little uncomfortable at times. It's going to be really wacky pants disorienting at times. The shamanic resonance is going to have you through the roof sometimes, because the earth, in her resonant frequency, in her heartbeat, she's not at her 7.8 on a regular basis anymore. Sometimes she's been up at 50 hertz and above for 6-7 hours straight, or just spikes up and down, up and down. Imagine the yo-yo of our frequencies, folks. Imagine the yo-yo. Imagine the intensity that we are all going to be feeling. It's fierce. It's fierce. So knowing that you have the choice, what does unconscious transition look like? I want to talk about unconscious transition. Unconscious transition looks like socially sanctioned suicide. This is not meant to sound insensitive. I am not insensitive, and I am not impermeable to this. In fact, I've been permeable many times. Socially sanctioned suicide is to be struck with a disease that you don't have lucid and conscious understanding of its origins, that is slowly robbing your body of its vitality and its life force, and eventually your spirit can't inhabit your body anymore. It's called illness. It's called chronic, in many cases, chronic, acute, terminal illness. We all are dealing with cancer cells, rogue cancer cells. We're all dealing with it. We're all dealing with frequencies that can overwhelm this physical density, this 4.7% that we're living in, that is this 3D vehicle. I've had cancer. Anybody else? My body's told me I had it. I've had diagnostics. I defer to being a medical intuitive, an energy intuitive. I defer to running the grid inside my body, looking at the energy around my body, going back into my body and saying, how fine-tuned is my vehicle? How healthy are my relationships? Thank you, Carolyn Mace and Dr. Norm Shealy and the many that have come before me that taught principles of conscious energy management, knowing when you are leaking energy, knowing when you are stuck in your energy, listening to your vehicle and not waiting until your body is in so much pain, so weak, so racked, so toxic that it almost feels unrecoverable. If we are feeling subtly into our energy field and we are sensitive to how does my energy run today? How am I feeling today? This is part of the conference. This is part of the discussion. Some of these people have been way showers back when they were children. Dr. Raymond Keller, Omnek Onek, who was not interviewed prior, but anyone that wants to look her up, she's been very public about being a Venusian that then came directly into a human body. She was on Jerry Springer, believe it or not, years ago, with firm conviction saying, listen, I don't care what NASA says about whether or not we have inhabitable planets in our solar system. What proof do we have that anything that they've told us is true? What proof do we have? Have you been up there consciously? Do you remember it? Do you know anyone who has? Are you friends with an astronaut? Do you know what most of our astronauts have said once they were no longer active astronauts and bound and tied contractually with NASA? They've all said that they're extraterrestrials. Edgar Mitchell was one of the loudest. Take a look at this. They've said that they've met them, they've seen the craft. Their accessibility to the moon, because there are so many bases on that moon, are very limited. So that opens the whole door up, doesn't it? If our own astronauts are willing to say this, and they're saying it lucidly with keen minds, and former decommissioned military men that are part of the Navy, part of secret space program, and we already know there's been full disclosure from members of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Pentagon and Department of Defense. I mean, now that we know what we know, you have to say, why couldn't there be people, beautiful, humanoid-looking people on Venus that have been coming here since the beginning of time? You know, Valiant Thor. It sounds silly, doesn't it? Why? Because Hollywood and mythology has got us tweaked into thinking that it's a joke, that it's laughable. It even comes naturally to me to kind of go, yeah, okay, I need to read more about that. I need to really study that. I have a keen mind. I have critical thinking skills. But you get deep into this kind of testimony and you look at their evidence and you look at what now has recently been revealed and you become an experiencer. Doubt falls away. The critic, the inner critic, becomes silent when the inner experiencer awakens. I am an experiencer. These people at this conference are amazing experiencers. So, how do you run your energy? If you aren't working on consciously managing your energy is being managed by whatever the willy-nilly energy is that it's around you. And that could be anything from toxic food, air, and water. It could be to relationships that have not been healthy for a very long time. It could be the 5G that's being deployed around the world, starting in Sacramento and Los Angeles right now, or at least that's what they've told us so far are the only places that are being commissioned, which is micromillimeter technology that permeates everything, including your body. So it's discordant waves running through your wave frequency body. It could be your smart meter, it could be your cell phone, it could be the Verizon wireless networks that are being built up left and right everywhere, making sure that you always get good cell service, because that's more important than having harmonious wave frequencies in your body, right? So at this conference, we're talking about these technologies. And then a really beautiful couple, probably easily in their late 70s, Marcia and Fred Ring. You know, that was a time where I was sitting in kind of a back side of the conference hall, having been walking around networking and connecting with amazing people. Just checking the time, we're actually at an hour. How did that happen? We're going to end on this note, folks. They're sharing their story in this gorgeous tandem dance that only a long-term and truly soulfully mated couple can do. And never interrupting each other in a way that was aggressive, loving, sweet, adoring. But Fred's story, Fred Ring, I think I said Bell. Did I say Bell? It is Marcia and Fred Ring, R-I-N-G. Tells how he learned at a very young age, because of his exposure to the elements and being outside and being a foster child and needing to become friendly with the world around him, not having warm, affectionate family, friends, connections, that he learned prior to being utilized as a scientist within our military systems, how to work with nature when tasked with certain technology that was ridiculously funded by the taxpayers, of course, mostly without our consciousness. We have no idea how many trillions have gone into these technologies, where money is spent rather carelessly on the backs of our citizens. But he was tasked with being able to force electrons into this cylindrical tube, into this cone, this funnel. And he decided after 6 months of doing it the way that the military was asking him to do it, running tests and trials, that he was going to instead ask the energies that were around him, that were the intelligent energies and influences that he had resonated with as a child, how would this experiment be able to be a success so I don't lose my job, so that I can prove my viability? You need to show me. And it showed the electrons, the energy, the intelligent energy showed him, we need to be able to breathe. What you're doing is you're forcing us into an oxygen-less vortex. And it is not natural for us to draw in at this trajectory. And we need to be able to breathe. And it gave him a visual image of 2 jugs of water dumping upside down, and both being held upside down, one with the lid off and pouring, and it kind of finding this resistance to being able to be emptied, and the other one with additional hole poked in the side of it so that oxygen could get in and spiral through, and the water empties, what, 2 to 3 times faster? Haven't we all experienced this, you know, with water bottles or jugs of water or soda bottles? And it showed him this. It said, I need to be able to breathe. So he was able to create a conduit with which oxygen could be pumped into this cylindrical cone, into this funnel. And he succeeded at his experiment, and he was ready to publish and provide his answers. But he realized that a department next to him was working with an anti-gravity that had to do with using some iron plates. And every single time they conducted the experiment the way that they had been asked to do it, again, not working with natural law, not working with natural law, but trying to manipulate and force natural law, they kept burning up these iron plates. And he revealed right there in front of the audience that they were burning up these iron plates at $10,000. This is back in the 50s. $10,000 a plate. Taxpayer paid, funded projects. And he was able to create a technology that I can't go into, or over time, and solve the problem for that department, even though he had not been tasked with that. And he went in front of his I don't know, his higher ups. I don't know what level of colonel or what level of military rank they happen to have been, but I do know that he was tasked to go and present it. And he presented both technologies beautifully, and was immediately told by that higher up, no, you aren't meant to solve it this quickly. You're meant to investigate all the ways with which it might be applicable, possible, technologically capable. You can't solve it this quickly. We have a budget for this. We intend to use the entire budget. You're going to make us look like fools. We've already pledged for X amount of millions of dollars. You can't solve it this quickly, and you are not authorized to solve it for them. You're going to create the same problem there. And I felt this huge heaviness fall over me. And when he explained that he tried to take some of that wisdom, some of that technological expertise to General Motors and showed them how he was able to create these anti-gravity devices while working with natural law. And because they could not grasp the simplicity of this and the inexpensiveness of its duplication, because it looked too much like free energy devices, too much like cold fusion, too much like Tesla coils, too much like some of the technologies that were at the conference that were healing technologies that were being used on me at the time, General Motors ran him out. They took his paperwork and they threatened him. There's no money in this. You're never to speak of this. You're not to use this. You're never ever to say that you were ever here. If this can't be monetized, we're not interested in this technology. And folks, these are the things that we are reminded of. When we really seek for the answers, we recognize that the answers are always here. They're in me, they're in you, and they have been provided to society. They have been provided. And we have given too much of our sovereignty, far too much of our sovereignty, and our individual and our collective and our societal power over to those that are looking to leverage that power for themselves. There is science beyond our wildest imagination. Take every Hollywood movie and every fabulous sci-fi concept, comic, literature you've ever read. Where do you think these brilliant minds come from? Where do you think these ideas are divine data downloaded from? We're in the 3D, 4D realm most of the time. Everything you can think of exists. There are famous quotes, and I could go on, and I'm not going to do it. I want to remind you, we are here to solve humanity's greatest issues. We have been trying to solve them now for decades and decades, maybe beyond our immediate society for hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of years, because we go through cycles. There's so much more going on out there in our immediate solar system. There's so much more going on in our universe and in the multiverses. But first we have to examine, have I claimed my sovereignty? Am I discerning? Have I used a critical mind? And am I claiming my power? And when we do this individually and we do it powerfully and it's real, we will collect with others just like I did at this conference. And we'll share our wisdom and we'll make a difference. So thank you for letting me rattle on. No interruptions. Nobody called. The chat room didn't blow up. I hope that you enjoyed this. This was just a taste of Mount Shasta. I didn't even get to get into going to the edge of the opening of that mountain and what took place there. There was no time. But I'm going to bring it back to you. You are my community. I am here to support the community that we are growing together, because always together we are the solution. Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.